Hello, I'm Philip Marris. I'm the CEO of Marris Consulting. I've been implementing the theory of constraints, usually combined with Lean, for over 30 years, over 200 times throughout the world in all sorts of industries, designing and making cars, trains, aeroplanes, rockets, hamburgers, and many other things. In this video, we're going to go through how you can boost your continuous improvement in your project environment once you have implemented critical chain. And we're also going to look at how you can combine critical chain with other ideas such as lean engineering, design for Six Sigma, agile, and many other ideas. It's important to realize that as far as I'm concerned, critical chain is just one of the elements you want to implement in the project environment, and indeed it is an enabler for many other very good things that you should be trying. It will provide a step change, and I hope we've described in the previous 3 videos of the series how you do that. It will provide a step change in performance whereby you should be able to do your projects about twice as fast. You should be able to do about twice as many projects per year or per person, and you should be able to basically finish nearly all of your projects on time or only have noble reasons for being late on certain projects. Okay, and that step change is going to take a month or a year to implement depending on the time of business you have. In fact, it's the lead time of your projects which will determine how quickly you change. So you've done that, you're probably the best in class already, and yet you need to go further. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, it should be the beginning of an important journey of continuous improvement, and that's what we're going to try and describe here. So how do we do this? It's in fact generic to all of the theory of constraints. It's all about buffer management. Okay, we've implemented critical chain, so we have a project buffer, right? And what we're going to do is analyze how that buffer is consumed, how it is used, and try and work out what the root causes are for that consumption, and that is going to define the priorities we have in terms of continuous improvement. So what you need to do is when you're executing in critical chain mode, not only do you note down as you execute the 2 operational pieces of information you need. The first one, obvious, which is what did I do this week, what have I been working on, and the second one, which is a little new, which is what are the tasks remaining, how much time do I have, how much time is required to finish this task. Okay, and we explained in the previous video what you do about that. The third new thing that you should ideally capture as you execute is why you were late. So what you do is whenever somebody declares that they spent more time than the focused duration, which is perfectly normal, I remind you that in 50% of the cases you'll be consuming more than the focused duration. When they do that, when it takes them 5 days instead of the 3 in the focused duration that was planned, they should note down why. Why was that? According to a certain number of categories, and we will build up a Pareto chart of what has been consuming the buffer. Okay, and this is fundamental, and it's more important than it looks, because obviously you could say we already do that, or in some form we're already doing that. But if you do that once you've implemented critical chain, you've in fact got rid of the noise, which was smothering the message, of poor priorities, multitasking, and so forth, all the managerial mess, right, which was in fact the main cause for your projects being late. And you're left with other reasons, and you're going to be able to identify these reasons and work on them in a focused fashion. And the second reason why this is going to be very powerful if you do it now, once you have critical chain, is you're going to do it in a much healthier environment. If you tried to do this sort of thing previously, you're always going to be trying to find a culprit for why you were late, trying to protect your particular department or your particular issue, and you are not allowed to express what the fundamental causes are, right? So now we have an environment where we've got rid of the managerial noise, and we're going to discover what further improvements are required to go even further in terms of performance. And it's also fundamental because very often we have found in our implementations over these past years that the main causes that people will identify are not at all what they were expecting. And what you will no doubt find very surprising when you do this is that the causes will not at all be what you were expecting. I remind you, if you go back to the beginning of these videos, the series, we said that one of the problems of managing projects was hard to estimate the duration of tasks, right? How long is it going to take me to have a good idea? How long is it going to take me to develop this piece of code? I don't know, right? And that was why it was difficult. So we would expect, if we did this Pareto, that the major cause of project buffer consumption would be variability, right? I took 5 days instead of 3. Well, we very, very rarely, in fact, we haven't ever had a case where that was the first cause of project consumption, of project buffer consumption. Let's take this example of one of our recent clients that is a major actor in the aircraft design and manufacturing. He implemented critical chain and he did his Pareto analysis, and this is what we found. Okay, now variability would have been what we would have expected as the main cause of project buffer consumption, right? It took me 5 days instead of 3 and all that stuff, right? Well, if you look at this particular graph, you'll see that variability is a minute source of delays, right? Variability is the 7th in the Pareto, not at all in the first bunch of 3, okay? So what was happening? The first consumption, the first cause of consumption was unidentified tasks. Okay, that's to say that somebody would have to do something that wasn't even in the planning. Somebody had forgotten to say we need to do this. Okay, and that is something that we find happens quite often. Okay, and so how can we deal with that? Well, the way of dealing with that is to be more rigorous in the way you start a project and you plan a project initially, and avoid as much as possible starting from a blank sheet of paper and saying, this is what I'm going to do to develop this new product, right? And imagine that there is no repetitivity, there are no lessons learned from the past. And what you need to do is develop a certain set of standard templates of projects, okay? And I don't think that in most cases a company can have just one template. I think they probably have to look at the kinds of projects that they're managing. I'll give you an example. In an engineering case such as this one, there is indeed the new product, which is basically completely new and has to be thought through right from the proof of concept to the end. It's probably one of the most complex networks of tasks, and so you have that one, okay. But that's just one of them. The second one could be just developing a variant or an improvement on an existing product, probably a lot simpler. The next one could be, I'm just going to change the raw materials I use in this product, much simpler. The third one could be, my teams, these engineering teams, are also used to transfer production from plant A to plant B, something completely different. So it's a project network which is unique, and so forth. And so what we've found is normally you can probably break down into about 5, maybe 8 different families, the types of projects that you do. You build these templates and you maintain them. And of course, having that will ensure that normally you don't forget tasks, or if you've forgotten a task once, you go back to the template and add it in, okay? And it will also be very good for continuous improvement, because you will have a standard template on which to improve, and you will little by little think about it and how to improve it, okay? So that's how you would have dealt with the first problem, unidentified tasks. In the same example, the second one was incomplete deliverables, okay? And this happens very often. It means that somebody had to, I don't know, design a detailed mechanical part, but he didn't have all the different specifications or whatever to work, okay? And he'd have to waste time calling up people or hunting down documents and all this sort of stuff, right? There are various ways of dealing with it. The one most impressive one, which is getting more and more popular, is to integrate it into your project management software, right? So imagine that you have a project management software that does what we've already described in terms of defining the priorities, and therefore can automatically tell an actor that, okay, he's got these 3 different tasks to do, but the first task he has to do is that one, project 12, okay? Go back to the other videos if you want to understand how that is possible. And when he opens the task, immediately is provided all the information he needs to start. And indeed the system is set up so that the people feeding him cannot close their tasks until they've provided that documentation, that plan, that detail of information and so forth, right? So in fact, as soon as he starts the task, he's guaranteed to have a full kit of information. Okay, that's how that was dealt with in this particular case. If we take another example, this one here, yet another recent client. I didn't do it on purpose, but once again, please note that variability is small and it's the 7th position, certainly not in the top reasons for project buffer consumption. But the causes were different. Unprotected risk and unidentified risk. Again, something we find happens quite often. Again, it's probably because there's so much madness going around that people don't take the time to do what they should with regards to risk management. Because if you've been trained, or if you know what you'll find in the PM book of the PMI, the Project Management Institute, or whatever other source of information you have on professional project management, you'll see what you have to do about risk management, and you would deal with it, right? But unfortunately, too often people no longer have the time, or there's going to be so much chaos in the system that they're not going to take the time to deal with risk. But once you've cleaned out all the other stuff, you're probably going to want to have a look at how you manage risks. At least this was the case for this company, right? So what are the two different categories there? Unprotected risk, that's to say it was identifiable risk that was not protected in the system. And I believe this is something that is nearly systematic, at least very frequent. What they were doing was they were quite good at risk management, but they were only provisioning risk financially, right? They said, there's a risk that this might happen, it's going to cost me 300,000 euro. Okay? But they did not simultaneously say, and it's going to cost me 3 weeks. Okay? Yet that problem, if it occurred, not only was going to cost money, it was going to take time to solve, right? So what they did was, from then on, not only did they identify and provision financially, but they provisioned in time, and they added that to the system, right? So that's a nice and easy thing, and I believe a lot of companies don't do that properly. Provision risks not only in terms of money, but in terms of time, right? The second, unidentified risks, well, I won't go into the detail of that. It was just that they were not fully and honestly implementing the best practices of risk management. And as I say, it's just yet another example of why, once you've cleaned out the business and are starting to work the critical chain way, you have a lot more time and a lot more good reasons to implement best practices in things such as risk management. So go to the chapter in the PMI book or whatever. Another point which personally I find very important with regards to the ongoing improvement under critical chain is that, as far as I'm concerned, and it's maybe a Marris Consulting thing, but it's something we strongly believe in, you should not just identify constraints. The theory of constraints, when properly implemented, is not just about identifying constraints. It's about ultimately choosing them, right? Applied to the critical chain world, that means what? You should not just calculate where your critical chain is. You should try and change things in your organization. It might take you 1 year, 5 years or whatever, so that the critical chain is where you want it. Okay? Because we're finding a lot of organizations where the critical chain is not really under their control anymore. The example we come across most frequently today is in the electronics part, the hardware and the software of electronics that will go into a product. Okay? And look at some of our other videos. We consider that too often companies are trying to develop tomorrow's products with yesterday's capabilities. They don't have enough software programmers, they don't have enough people that manage these new technologies, so they subcontract it. Okay, they subcontract it to somebody who's really good, world-class leader in that and that. Okay, but then you get to the situation where, in fact, the development of your product, you'll do your thing, your toothbrush or whatever it was, and then there'll be the IT part. It will be entirely external, and it might end up being longer than it takes you to do your products, right? So your critical chain will end up 80% outside with a subcontractor. You're not controlling your own product development anymore. You're at the mercy of a subcontractor. Okay, so that's very unhealthy, right? So as far as possible, you should really try little by little to move the critical chain to where you want it. Let me give you a concrete example of these. Recently, we had with one of our clients who did exactly that quite quickly. One of the top 3 manufacturers of water meters in the world implemented critical chain, got all the usual results and stuff, but they were unhappy with what the critical chain looked like, because in their case, 37% of its duration, 37% of its length, was subcontracting to mold manufacturers, right? The water meter had a casing, and that casing was made out of a sophisticated kind of plastic. They had to have a mold to inject that, and that was done by external mold manufacturers, okay? And when we started, it took them over 4 weeks to get a mold made, and it had to be done several times in the process. So that ended up being the 37%. So they said, we can't carry on like this, we need to do something about it. So what they did, it took them a couple of years or a year and a half. They chose a partner, a mold manufacturing partner, and they built a long-term partnership. They gave them or lent them one of their manufacturing machines so that the mold could be tested immediately in situ with the mold manufacturer. And basically they managed, and they did all sorts of things with regards to priorities, reserved capacities, scheduling and so forth. And they shrunk the lead times of making a mold from 5 weeks to 5 days, okay? And they got rid of that problem. They put their mold manufacturing under control with a partnership that was acting fast, and that problem disappeared, okay? That's just one example among many. If your critical chain is not under your control, you're not going to get very far. A few more examples. One of our clients implemented critical chain in banking software. They sold and implemented CRM software in banks, and they successfully implemented critical chain. They looked at what was consuming the buffer. It was the client. The client was consuming the buffer. What was happening? Well, these systems had to be integrated into the IT systems of the bank clients throughout the world, and from bank to bank. These banks were often mergers of different banks. Anyway, the IT systems were quite a big mess, okay? And the databases were polluted and incompatible and all that stuff. And so what was controlling the speed with which they could implement their software was building all these interfaces, right? So they changed their capabilities so that they became much more professional at helping their clients to build the interfaces between them and the systems, okay? And in doing so, well, they found that was a new service offering, because that would help banks themselves if they could improve the interfacing between two different banks within the same organization. Anyway, that was an example where the main problem, it's rarely the case, but this is certainly true in their case, the problem was with their client and their capacity to interface between different banks to work out the credit card rating of this person or whatever. Okay, so we got to the stage where we've implemented critical chain, we're doing buffer management and getting better and better, and so we're probably world-class leaders in our business and so forth. Is that a reason to stop? No, certainly not. What have we done? Well, if we've properly done critical chain, we've got a very, very good project management system, right? We're very efficient. The projects are done very fast. They finish more or less on time. We're doing a lot of them because we're not multitasking. So we're extremely efficient at doing projects. Fine. What's missing? Well, what's missing is making sure we did the right project. Okay? If it's in product development, did we develop a good product? Okay? What's the point in very quickly and delivering on time a car that doesn't work very well? Okay? So critical chain is wonderful at what it does, but really if you want to get far, something, it may be already in your genetic code and not a problem. You need to make sure that you're choosing the right products and developing beautiful products that are going to sell well and kill the market, right? Now, there are several approaches and ideas that handle this, right? Probably the most well-known is lean engineering, or lean product and process development, or again, Toyota product and process development. And the other one is design for Six Sigma. It's not in this video, we're going to describe those two things. You can look at some of the other stuff we do with regards to that. If you want to understand what lean engineering does, the main authors, as far as I'm concerned, is Alan Ward, who unfortunately left unfinished business because he died early on in his career, and you've got other authors such as Massitelli or Leica and stuff. Have a look, because it's all about exactly this. How do you make sure that what you're working on is a good product, corresponding to client and market requirements, also easy to make, important subject today, because so often there are those that design things, and then those that try and make what's been designed, and it's not very satisfactory. We do a lot of work with aeroplanes these days, and if they could just design things that were easy to build, it would make a big difference, right? Now, why is critical chain and lean engineering such a wonderful mix? Well, lean engineering is going to require you to invest over the long term a lot of your key people's time to improve capabilities, develop standards, increase and improve knowledge management and all these sorts of things. And you'll never be able to spend the right amount of time on that if you're in a firefighting environment where people are going from one overdue project to another, right, and don't even have the time to do a project analysis at the end to work out, lessons learned, how can we do things better. Unfortunately, even that is disappearing, right? So if you implement critical chain, you're going to reduce the pressure on people to do projects, and you're going to be able to get them to spend more and more time on other work that is increasing the performance in the medium and long term, right? How to be more efficient, how to have better standards, how to train up more people, how to test ideas before they have to be integrated into a product. Okay, so that's very important, and I repeat, I firmly believe that if you want to do lean engineering, and I think you should, if you're in that kind of environment, then consider doing critical chain first, because it will create an environment in which you can do lean engineering. Trying to do lean engineering in a madhouse is not possible. Okay, so one of the things that I think is the beauty of critical chain is it enables you to do lean engineering. Well, what about agile? It's, as I speak in 2018, massively being used in all the software world, and more in other areas. Indeed, we've used it recently in an area that had nothing to do with it with armaments. The approach is completely valid. We implement it, and it is very powerful. Is it compatible or not with critical chain? The answer is yes. Again, they complement each other, but in a different way. The critical chain will bring what it is forte, which is to give you good visibility on the medium and long term, so that you know when you can expect to finish things. Okay, and the agile system will ensure that the production, whether it's by weekly sprints, time boxed, or whatever other system you're using, can operate correctly and give all the value added that it does. Okay. So you put the two together and you get the best of both worlds, right? If you're looking for a good reason to combine agile and critical chain, please consider this. One of the companies that has been using critical chain now for over 12 years and is using it for all the development of all its products, and considers that it basically saved the company, or at least was one of the contributors to saving the company, is Mazda, the car manufacturer. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you haven't done so, I encourage you to look at the 3 previous ones. This is the 4th in a series of 4, all about critical chain project management. And they are all extracts of our one-day training course, which we run regularly. Will you dare to finish all your projects on time? That's what it's called. It's one day, and it's highly recommended, because here you've had 4 times 20 minutes of a presentation. We go into more detail, and it enables you to ask all the questions you might have with regards to how to apply it in your company, and discuss it with other companies so that you can share your problems and your challenges. And so if you want to go further in your critical chain journey, please don't hesitate to come to one of our training courses. Thank you very much.